think, and I should be allowed to let the mirror stop.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay.
That was abrupt.
Who needs fades anyway in this modern technology? Anyway, welcome back. This is the Atheist Experience, and I'm your host today, Ashley Perrien, and my co-host, Russell Glaser.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I have been off the air for 2 weeks, so if I am rusty, forgive me. Anyway, this is the Atheist Experience. We are being hosted or sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a non-profit educational organization promoting positive atheism and separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at Crescent City Beignets on 6th Street, a couple blocks west of Lamar. I think the actual address is 1211 West 6th Street. Those start at 11:30 and go until usually around 1, 2 o'clock. It's very social, very open. Any atheist-friendly people more than welcome to come down and join us. Don't have to be a member or anything like that. That is every Sunday, save the third Sunday of the month when we have our lecture series at the Austin History Center on 9th and Guadalupe. Those start at 12:30. And actually, it's normally the third Sunday. This month, the Austin History Center is closed, and we are not having a lecture. So it's just going to be our normal Sunday beignet meeting next week. Next week would normally be a third Sunday lecture, but we're just going to beignets next week. I don't know if we have a lecture scheduled for January or not. I'll try and get information on that. And if you go to our website, atheist-community.org, they would have information there. They have a link to a calendar of events, and it would have information there if we do have somebody lined up. But that is usually the third Sunday of the month, 9th in Guadalupe at 12:30. Other regular things that we do is every Monday night at 7 o'clock, we have Godless Gamers at this man's house. And it's basically board games, card games, role-playing games, all that kind of stuff. Anything that, kind of catches our fancy for the night. Again, if you go to our website, they'll have information there, or at least a link to, I think, your email address or something like that.
Yeah.
To somehow get information on that. So go to our website and log in if you are a member. That's every Monday night. Thursday nights, we have Atheist Happy Hour at Antonio's Tex-Mex on the southbound feeder of I-35, just south of 183. That is, again, just like the Sunday meeting, open, not very formal, just come down and chat. It starts at 7:30 and goes until around 10 o'clock or thereabouts. And that's every Thursday night, Antonio's Tex-Mex, 7:30. That is it for our regular scheduled announcements. So, welcome back to the show. This is the Atheist Experience. We are going to be on for the next hour and a half, and we are a live call-in show. We'll be opening up the phones in a little bit. First, got a couple things to go over, and we're going to start with Russell Glaser, who's going to tell us about somebody old.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to jump around a little bit.
Okay.
What ultimately where I'm going with today is that I want to introduce a meme to you. But before I can do that, I would like to introduce to you what a meme is, what it means. I think this is something that a lot of atheists already know about, just because it enters online discussions a lot. But for those of you who haven't heard the topic before, meme is a word that was coined by Richard Dawkins, a very well-known atheist biologist and evolutionist. Wrote some great books called The Blind Watchmaker, Climbing Mount Improbable, and one of his other well-known books is The Selfish Gene. And that's the book that he used to coin the word meme. And it goes something like this. In evolution, you have the concept of what genes do. Genes are basically the single unit of selection. So when you see that some people have blue eyes and some people have brown eyes, we say that they have a blue-eyed or a brown-eyed gene. And when they have, the color of their hair, their height, how fast they can run, or how strong they can wind up getting if they work out a lot. A lot of that is controlled by genes. There's some political controversy over some genetic issues, like whether, say, alcoholism or homosexuality might be controlled by your genes. Now, the interesting thing is that evolution says that basically genes can either be beneficial or not beneficial, and genes which are not beneficial tend to get their hosts killed a lot, and genes which are beneficial tend to survive, and then since they don't die as much, they become more popular, let's say, in later generations. And what Richard Dawkins says sometimes, which is really interesting, is that it's not species that evolve, it's genes. And in a weird sort of way, you could say that we are nothing more than carriers for our genes. We sort of transmit or don't transmit genes, and in some sense, it's not species that evolve, because species actually change over time, but genes are the unit of selection. They're either there or they're not. Okay. They're sort of, the ultimate code. Another funny way that Richard Dawkins, or not Dawkins, but I think it was the philosopher Daniel Dennett said, you can think of it this way. Let's say that a scholar is just a library's way of building another library. The library sort of gets in the head of the scholar and causes new ideas to propagate, or else causes old ideas which turned out to be good to be passed on to another scholar, who then takes the library and creates yet another one. So it's sort of, in this case, it's sort of ideas that are reproducing. And that's where the concept of a meme comes in. Okay. And by the way, this is totally unprepared, so I hope it's not as random as it could be. All right. Well, meme is sort of a conglomerate word of memory and gene, I think, is where it comes from. And what he suggests is that ideas work like genes do, sort of the same way, which is an interesting concept, because if you're going to think about instinct, like if something attacks you, then run away, that's instincts you don't think about. They're controlled by genes. What you were born with kind of determines your instinct. You can't create instincts, I don't think.
Well, technically, I guess a form of instinct you could do. Lots of time if you practice something.
Sure, yeah, something could become so ingrained in a way.
But sports players, for instance.
Right.
But
I mean,
not quite the same thing.
Yeah, it depends on what somebody decides to practice or not practice. For instance, being able to play baseball is not a skill that would have served us very well as cavemen.
Yes.
I mean, there are limited applications, like, hit something with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
That could have been useful. But I mean, we didn't evolve automatically knowing how to play baseball.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, baseball is a meme, because it's a concept that gets passed down over time. The sport of baseball is, less than 200 years old. I don't know the history. But
they had rounders before that, if nothing else.
Right. But of course, the meme of baseball has probably evolved over time, because the rules changed to fit the situation. I mean, if nothing else, they didn't have rules about steroids back then, because the concept of a steroid didn't exist at that point.
Yeah.
So what Richard Dawkins and later his colleague, Susan Blackwell or Blackmore, I wish I'd looked that up, but what they suggested was that ideas evolve in the same way that species evolve. They get evolved through the memes. And just like genes, ideas can be well suited to evolve. In other words, they can be good at passing on and replicating and staying in somebody's mind for a really long time. Or they can be bad and die off. And just because something is a successful meme doesn't mean that it's good or beneficial to the host. I mean, like, there was a great short story by Mark Twain that I remember reading. There was a commercial jingle that got stuck in his head. They didn't have TV or radio, but they had like little poems stuck on a sheet of paper somewhere, and it was something like I don't know. It was for some train company that was really proud of the efficiency of their ticket takers, and it went something like, "Punch, brothers, punch with care, punch in the presence of a passenger." Now that's a meme that's actually stuck in my head. That's a completely useless bit of trivia, but that's actually what the story was about, because he got this so stuck in his head that he wandered around in a daze. You know, he couldn't think about anything else. It was driving him crazy, and the way he eventually got rid of it was he went to a lecture and stood up in front of a whole room full of people and recited the poem.
Oh, jeez.
And once he got it stuck in all their heads, he could get over it.
See, and that is a great meme.
Exactly.
It's a gene that has figured out
It's
that
a meme.
one gets itself, meme, that has got itself implanted in one person's head and can easily be transmitted to others.
Right.
And they carry it on as well.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, just think about all the crappy songs you know. I can't think of one offhand, and if I... Small world. See, now you've infected... No, see...
I've infected Austin.
No, the awful thing is, I already knew that song, and you just sort of triggered it.
Yeah.
So... that's a song that's been passed around,
for
by anyone who
years.
went to Disney. It got stuck in their head.
Yeah.
And of course, some people say that religion is a meme.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other topic, and I think it's one that Don Baker is really good at, right?
Yeah, he's done a couple lectures on that. To
Right.
the group
So
and
I'm
on
not
the show.
going to encroach on Don's turf.
Turf wars on the Atheist Experience.
Right. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is that memes are ideas that spread from mind to mind, and they can be good or bad at replicating. People, if you've seen the movie Amadeus, everybody knows what Mozart's music sounds like, but almost nobody knows what Salieri's music sounds like, and that's a meme that has almost all but died.
Yeah.
So, let's see, I'm going to shift gears now and get back to what I originally wanted to talk about today, which is the way that I think memes spread through the media, let's say. Jon Stewart on The Daily Show, which is a terrific show, likes to do clips once in a while of something that has been said and repeated by a whole lot of people. So, for instance, he took, when this whole thing about John Kerry being a flip-flopper first came out, he showed like clip after clip of people going, basically he's a flip-flopper, 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 and, just showed different clips of different people, and it was a riot. And there's a way in which I think there's almost sort of a concerted effort at times to create memes through the media and create sort of a storyline that people can follow. So I would like to spread what I think is sort of a beneficial meme today for us atheists. And this was not my idea, by the way. This is sort of Jeff's brainchild, but I've helped him set up a website, and I wrote up his thoughts in an essay that he looked over. And to give you some background on this, I'm going to talk about the kinds of questions that we deal with here, a lot of which you can see on our fact page, which Steve can put up. We get, I would say the most common kinds of questions that we get are can be broadly broken up into two categories. One is questions of fact, and the other is questions of value.
Okay.
This is questions of fact are things like what is, like how do you explain how something as complicated as us got here without any God?
Yeah.
Or well, how do you explain why this person prayed and they got what they asked for? And the simple answer to questions of that type is basically science. We can. That's the answer that we usually give to those sorts of questions. We say there's science, there's research done on this. You can do experiments to verify that these are true. Since it involves what happens in the real world, you can make up experiments that show you whether they do or don't happen under certain circumstances. And so those are actually the easier sort of questions to deal with. One of my favorite questions is one of my favorite Christian arguments, because it's so silly, is the first cause argument.
Yes.
Which is, something must have caused the universe to happen, because everything needs a cause, right?
Yeah, everything has a starting point.
Right. So there must have been a first cause somewhere, and that must have been God.
Yeah.
The reason this argument is so easy to dispense with is that the contradiction is contained right there in the argument. First they say everything needs a cause, and then they say, well, there must be something without a cause.
Yeah.
And then they slap the label God on it, but they didn't notice that what they just said contradicts themselves. Either everything needs a cause or it doesn't. If not everything needs a cause, then there's no need to make up a God, because, it could have just as easily been stuff as God, which is what you're trying to explain in the first place. The natural question that comes after that is, who created God? And then you get into the more abstract arguments like, God is outside of time and eternal, but, they're just making all that up.
Yeah.
But the other kind of questions of value, those are sort of harder to deal with, because when you ask things like, what is moral? How can you prove that you're a better person than Hitler, for instance? It's hard to say that this is, as an atheist, that this is actually woven into the fabric of the universe, right? That it's automatically bad to kill people. I mean, first of all, there's all these gray areas about, would you kill somebody who was about to kill 10 people?
Yeah, self-defense,
right.
War, stuff like that.
And that leads to big arguments, and that has that has sort of bothered philosophers for thousands of years. But, it doesn't seem like morality has any simple answers as an atheist. You just have to sort of argue, look at what your goals are. I mean, like, I would like to live a long and happy life. I'd like to live in a society where I'm not stressed out all the time. I'd like to live in a society where my stuff isn't going to be stolen and I can't do anything about it. And we look at historically what societies work and what don't, and blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't make a good soundbite, Whereas Christians and other religious people have a great soundbite, which is, killing is wrong because God says so. That's real easy to understand.
Yeah.
We, as atheists, think it's wrong, but it's
nice and convenient.
It's easy to communicate.
Yeah.
It's a fallacy, though, in the same way that that saying that things must have a first cause is a fallacy. It's not useful to invoke God as your explanation for what's right and wrong. And in fact, this was dealt with by a philosopher, about 2,000 years ago, who you might have heard of. He was Socrates.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Yes. And of course, there's questions about whether he really existed, because all we know of him is written by Plato, supposedly his student. But there was a particular dialogue that Plato wrote that was strikingly similar to the kind of argument that I've just presented, that you can't prove morality unless you invoke a god.
Yeah.
This was called, and I'd like my title to be put up on the screen. There it is. This was called the Euthyphro dialogue. Oh, I can't see.
It's on there.
Euthyphro. And I have to tell you that when Jeff D said he wanted to spread this as a meme, I had the reaction that everybody else so far has heard of, which is you can't spread that. It's too hard to spell. But we're going to try, because the virtue of things being hard to spell is that once you can spell it, it's pretty easy to look up on the internet without getting 50 million competing web pages, right? So we've registered a website called euthyphroproject.com. So let me tell you what Euthyphro said, or what the dialogue Euthyphro was about. You know how Socrates was in these dialogues. He was always making a pest of himself, going around asking people questions and driving them crazy. Yeah.
So Euthyphro is a poor sap in this one who gets caught up.
Yes, exactly.
So, okay.
Now what Euthyphro was doing was he was a lawyer, and he was prosecuting a case against his own father. And I believe that the idea that you would prosecute your own father seemed even more horrific in those days than it would now, because they took the family unit very, very seriously in ancient Greece.
Okay.
It was one of the most, it was like important above society. So Socrates asks him, why would you do a thing like that? And Euthyphro says, well, because it's the right thing to do. And that naturally leads them into a long, drawn-out dialogue about what's pious and how do you know, which is just like what we're talking about now. And Euthyphro gives a really simple soundbite answer, which is, and this may sound familiar, piety is that which is dear to the gods, and impiety is that which is not dear to them. Sounds easy enough. And Socrates says, well, I'm confused. The point which I would first wish to understand is whether the pious is holy, or the pious or holy is beloved by the gods because it is holy, or whether it is holy because it is loved by the gods. In other words, how does the holy thing get to be holy? And this was an even more mind-bending question in ancient Greece, because they had 100 gods who all said different things about piety. So there you have a big problem. Yeah. Because if Zeus says one thing and Athena says something else, well, I think Athena is outranked by Zeus. But but
still you get that
if we
contradiction.
Have Mercury and Hephaestus, for instance.
Yeah. Contradictory gods.
Yeah, you've got a problem. But you've also got a problem of why do the gods like the things that they do? For instance, and we'll take this away from Greek gods and we'll bring it back to the supposedly one omnipotent Trinity God who never disagrees with itself.
Of course.
Why would God say, thou shalt not kill? As atheists, we have to sit around and discuss, well, it's not good to kill somebody because they wind up dead, and furthermore, you wind up setting an example where it's okay to kill people, so you have to punish people who kill each other just to maintain order, and so on and so on, whereas a Christian would just say, well, God said don't kill. But it's not that simple, and that's my whole point when I say Euthyphro to you.
Yeah.
The reason it's not that simple is, did God make up the idea that it's wrong to kill? Or is it just really wrong to kill and God just told you so?
Yeah.
Well, there's a problem no matter what your answer is. If if God just made up the idea that it's wrong to kill, then it's arbitrary.
Okay.
Because it's like God could come tomorrow and say, okay, I like killing now. Everybody kill each other. Now, the common objection to this would be that God never changes. To which I would say, well,
Just read your Bible.
Supposedly God can do whatever he wants. He's omnipotent, right? If he wanted to change, he could. But, even assuming that he doesn't change his mind, couldn't he have said from the very beginning that, okay, in this universe, forever, killing's going to be great. I'm into it. Raping, stealing, all that stuff's good. And at this point, the theist that you're arguing with might say, well, I mean, that's ridiculous. God would never say that killing is wrong because, God would never say that killing is right because it is wrong. I mean, it's just bad to kill people.
Okay.
At which point we say, aha, then there's a standard, but it's not God's.
Yeah.
God is just passing along the sort of universal wisdom that has nothing to do with him. He's just sort of a messenger.
Yeah.
He's just saying, okay, in this universe or throughout the universe, it's wrong to kill people, and I'm just reminding you of this fact, but it's true no matter what.
Yeah.
In that case, it should, in order to figure out what's moral or not moral, we should figure out by reason what the point is of not killing, because that seems to work a lot better than just trying to decipher the Bible. Because you've seen all these things that are in the Bible, like don't eat shellfish, don't wear two kinds of fabrics. How do we know that not killing is more important than not eating
shellfish?
Not eating shellfish. Or to keep it within the Ten Commandments, how do we know that working on the Sabbath is not such a big deal?
Yeah.
And killing is.
Yeah.
Because, it seems that...
What are his priorities?
It seems that societies that made a big deal of enforcing don't work on the Sabbath turned out worse from a historical perspective than ones that didn't. And that's just my opinion. But it looks to me pretty clear. So we've got these. Also, another thing that I'd say is that in the Bible, God tells people to do some pretty surprising things if you're going to go with this absolute morality concept, right? Like, Isaac, I want you to kill your son.
Yes.
Let's apply that to today. Let's say that you are sitting at home and a vision appears to you and says, this is God, I want you to kill your son. And you say, but you said don't kill. And God says, doesn't matter, I'm God, kill your son. Of course, he didn't actually kill his son, but that's not the point, because in the Bible, Isaac is held up as a really great and moral guy because he was going to kill his son.
Yeah.
He actually takes a knife and he gets ready to do it, and then God says, I was kidding.
Here's a goat instead.
Yeah. But I mean, Isaac is supposedly exceptionally moral because he was going to kill his son. Does that sound like a good idea to you?
No.
What if God came to you and said, there's a virgin living next door. I want you to go rape her. That may be an example in poor taste, but so is a lot of the Bible.
It's, again, if God can choose whatever he wants, it just defeats the whole purpose.
Right.
There's a reason that logic works better.
Exactly.
Because we typically come up with many of the same rules.
Yeah.
In general, the ones that actually people care about. Don't work on the Sabbath, kind of toss that one off to the side.
Right.
Consider religious people.
Or don't make any graven images, because that's one even a lot of Christians don't really follow. Like Roy Moore.
True. But again, it just goes back. We've had calls on this show, people calling in saying, and we basically argue them into the corner and say, assuming tomorrow, for some reason, you found out that there was no God, couldn't possibly exist, would you start killing and stealing and murdering? And they answer yes. Because there's no ultimate reward, because God's not going to punish them, because it's not wrong anymore,
I'm not.
all of a sudden that's okay.
I have to say, I'm not even sure I believe them.
No, I don't. I don't
I
believe
think
them.
they're just saying it because that's what they've been reduced to saying.
They've been stuck in a corner and they can't get out
Yeah.
without contradicting themselves. So they say that. I don't believe them. But it still makes the point that if you have a logical basis for why killing and stealing is bad,
Yeah.
then regardless of your beliefs, it still
Right.
stands up. If all of a sudden you do discover that God said don't do this because it's bad, and all of a sudden you don't have God anymore, the basis for your morality is very, very shaky.
Right. It's like something my sister Karen says sometimes, that if you parent people by saying, don't do this, don't do that, and then they grow up and move out of the house, they're going to immediately do everything you told them not to just because they can.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say, look both ways before crossing the street because you might get hit by a car, and you take that general approach to child raising, then they're going to have sort of a foundation for staying moral once they're out of the house.
Yeah.
Well, so anyway, getting back to Euthyphro, you have these two possibilities, and neither one looks particularly good for God. Either God just made up the rules, in which case there's nothing inherently bad about killing, it's just what God felt like saying. Or there is an actual standard of morality that has nothing to do with God, in which case you're kind of wasting your time trying to figure out what God meant by a whole bunch of different Old Testament proclamations, some of which just don't apply anymore, even according to many Christians.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, not stoning disobedient children. They say, well, that's just Old Testament. Well, how do you know that one doesn't apply and this one does? And they say, well, it just makes sense. And then you go, aha.
What sense?
Then let's reason about it and let's reach moral conclusions that way.
Yeah.
Let's quit talking about God. Now, the reason that we feel that this is important to spread this meme is because whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, if you're a liberal atheist, a conservative atheist, a libertarian atheist, or whatever, I think we atheists, at least, can all agree that religion has gotten way too mixed up in politics lately.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's worse than, say, the 50s, but I think it's definitely worse than the 90s.
Yeah.
Can you agree with that?
Okay.
And we would like to reverse the trend. And one of the things that is happening because of the trend is that politicians on both sides of the aisle all feel the need to pander to religious people. Because if they say, well, I don't really go to church, then that's an open invitation to say, you're immoral.
Yeah.
That's not true.
They're trying to take the moral high ground.
Because believing in God really doesn't make a difference to whether you can figure out what's moral or not. And God isn't even all that useful.
Or more importantly, whether you will be moral yourself.
Right?
There are lots of studies out there that show that, the highly religious have just as many
Yeah, but
ethical and
I'm
moral
trying to
flaws.
keep this on a philosophical level right now.
We'll bring that up at a later date.
Right. I just don't want to bounce around too much because
Okay.
I've already talked a lot, but it's time for the phone number. In any case, I'd encourage you to go to this website, www.euthyphroproject.com. It has a lot of what I've been saying. And in the future, it's going to have what people will argue, how people will argue against us, and what to say about that.
Okay.
And what we'd like to do overall is spread this mind virus to people and sort of take away the moral high ground and sort of instill an appropriate level of doubt and skepticism, because that's always a good thing in the general public.
Yeah. So. All right. As I said a second ago, we are a live call-in show, and we will be taking phone calls as soon as we get somebody on. Phone number will go up on your screen momentarily. Going back to what you were saying a little bit earlier, I can take this on a slightly different spin here.
Okay.
There was an article that came out this week talking about a supposedly very big, prominent, a British philosopher professor who apparently has been a leading champion of atheism for more than half a century. He's changed his mind. Now, this person, Anthony Flew, I don't recognize the name. It's possible that I've read some of his writings or ideas that kind of, go down the chain and I've, heard some of them, that type of thing. I don't recognize the name, so for what that's worth. But he says he now believes in God, more or less, based on scientific evidence, and says so in a video released on Thursday. At age 81, after decades of insisting belief is a mistake, Anthony Flew has concluded that some sort of intelligence or first cause must have created the universe. A superintelligence is the only good explanation for the origin of life and the complexity of nature, Flew said in a telephone interview from England. Flew said he's best labeled as a deist, like Thomas Jefferson, whose God was not actively involved in people's lives. Basically, that usually means that there was a God out there who kind of started everything off, and now he just sits back and laughs occasionally. He doesn't actually, perform miracles. Praying to him ain't going to get you anything. There's no afterlife. It's just God started off, and
he doesn't jump out of the bushes and say, "Kill your son."
Exactly. Sacrifice goats or anything like that. So, here is a couple quotes. Yet biologists' investigation of DNA has shown, by almost unbelievable complexity of the arrangements which are needed to produce life, that intelligence must have been involved. The first hint of Flew's turn was in a letter in the August-September issue of Britain's Philosophy Now magazine. It has become inordinately difficult even to begin to think about constructing a naturalistic theory of the evolution of the first reproducing organism. Now then, I will throw this out to the viewers, who most of you hopefully will be able to recognize this. What common, beginner, third grade logical fallacy is being committed here?
Do third graders learn logical fallacies?
Should they?
Well, yeah, but
Okay,
I mean, you say it's third grade, I assume that they do.
Well, this is one that when you're looking at critical thinking and
I'll give you
and stuff like
sixth
that,
grade.
It's one of the early ones that comes along when you're studying this. Now, whether that be third grade, 10th grade, 45 years old, whatever, I don't know. Here's an actual quote from Flew. "My one and only piece of relevant evidence is the apparent impossibility of providing a naturalistic theory of the origin from DNA of the first reproducing species."
That's the sum, that's the total of his scientific evidence?
Apparently. The only reason which I have for beginning to think of believing in a first cause God is the impossibility of providing a naturalistic account of the origin of the first reproducing organisms. So now you made
quiz question.
You made a point saying the impossibility of providing this.
Don't give any hints.
Is he saying that this is actually impossible? It cannot be done? So anyway, that is open to our callers. You can call in at that phone number, which just went away.
And also open to our callers is Euthyphro.
Exactly, Euthyphro.
Can you give a good reason why God has to be involved in morality?
Exactly. Why do we have to turn to God to be moral, some higher power to be moral, when what we think is logic and reason tend to be a better way of doing things? We can come up with good examples why you shouldn't kill, steal, and so on. Why should we instead say, because God says so? So, all right. So those are the two things that we would like to hear from all callers about. Let's go on. Let's go ahead and take a quick call here. We have got our first caller on the line. Mike, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. What you got for us?
I can hardly hear you. I have a question. It's actually about values, unfortunately. It's a little off track, I'm sorry. But is there a valid atheist argument in favor of the right to life?
The atheist position is that God doesn't exist, or that we have no belief in God.
Okay, so where does that fit in relation to the right to life or the right to choice?
Good question. Technically, there is no atheist or humanist or any kind of viewpoint to that I have ever heard of, at least. Again, atheists don't have a dogma to follow or any Bible saying that, killing bad, abortion good, or anything like that. Now there can be arguments one way or the other.
Let's hear them.
Well, most of the ones that I've always heard have been pro-choice. Are there some humanist, I guess, would be the term for it? Pro-life arguments?
I have read of a few atheists who are opposed to abortion.
Okay, do you know what their argument for it was?
Let me look at it and take a long view. It's wrong to kill people, right?
Okay.
When they're grown up.
Okay.
There are up until they're born, it's sort of a gray area. A few diehard pro-choicers would say it's okay to abort right up till the day of birth.
Okay.
I don't really feel comfortable with that, and neither does the Supreme Court, which is why the wording of Roe versus Wade is the way it is.
Okay.
It's basically, it divides it up into trimesters, and during the first trimester, it's almost always okay. During the last trimester, it's almost never okay, and in the middle, it's in between.
Okay.
What pro-life atheists, I think, would say is, we don't know for sure when this fetus starts being enough like a person that it would not be okay to kill them. So why not play it safe?
Okay.
and let them, and just not allow abortions.
Okay. Okay.
Does
So
that
the gray
tell you
area.
anything?
Well, abortion is certainly anti-selective in the Darwinian sense.
I don't care. Darwinism is simply a fact of the way things work. It's not a prescription for how you're supposed to do things.
I suppose.
I mean,
You have a young son, right?
I mean, the trying to make Darwinism a moral prescription is what brought about things like social Darwinism, where, for instance, they said, let the poor all starve, don't do anything at all. Sooner or later, they'll just all be dead, and then no more poor people.
Yeah.
There's some flaws in that logic.
Darwin, and by extension science, is not a moral teacher. It tells you this is the way the world is. Like it or not, lightning kills. That's not a moral choice. It's not anything about that. It's a fact. That's what science has found.
And some people would interpret that to mean you should never use electricity because electricity is wrong.
Exactly. I mean, you can twist things however you want.
As evidenced by the fact that it kills you.
Yeah, Darwin was not saying this is good and this is bad. He's saying this is apparently how the world works. Now, we're not asking you to like it. We're saying this is how it works. So.
But atheists do have a moral and ethical system, right? Or at least humanists do.
Logic and reason typically takes over, but...
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's wrong to kill.
Humanism itself is a moral and ethical system, I believe. What?
Killing is wrong because if we allowed killing, okay, then anybody can kill you, or anybody can kill me.
But is killing always wrong?
It usually is, yeah.
But is it always wrong?
Well, abortion's not always wrong.
We're not talking about abortion
for
just
the
yet.
woman.
We're not talking about abortion just yet. Killing. Is it wrong to kill somebody, period, full stop?
Yes.
Okay.
Even if that person is about to kill you.
And your family.
And
See, that's why you can't put full stop on that.
Exactly.
Which is
There are
Yeah,
cases
that's
of
his point.
self-defense.
That's the point.
okay, so we need to look at the situation and figure out what's the difference between a situation where it's okay to kill somebody and when what's okay not to kill somebody. Would you feel bad about killing an ant?
Killing a what?
An ant.
an ant.
Some people
Okay.
would.
Well, ants are pests and they attack people's property, and sometimes you have to kill them.
How about an
That's
ant
self-defense.
that's not doing any of that? It's just walking around and you just step on it. By
Shame on
accident.
you.
What?
Shame on you then.
Would you really, I mean, should you be punished for that?
Nobody will. I guarantee you that.
Well, should you?
The ants don't have a God either.
In a perfect world, would you be smitten dead because you killed an ant?
In a perfect world, would I be smitten dead because I killed an ant? Probably not.
So there are differences, and they kind of depend on how, where...
Where in the
You go.
food chain, I guess you could say, almost. Where the
I don't want to say food
Not
chain,
food
because
chain.
that's going to sound weird when we're talking about
not
abortion.
food chain, but when you're talking about ants, which is way down on this end of the spectrum, killing them while not promoted, not good, not ideal, you can live with that. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum, killing people.
Right.
Or it's usually not bad, not good.
Or let's say you had to step on 10 ants to save one person. I mean, this is very,
Bees.
this is
Killer
very
bees.
eclectic. Yeah, killer bees.
No,
You had to-
yeah, right.
Killing some
Spray
killer
them or
bees,
something.
killing a nest of killer bees so that they don't, kill your family.
Yes,
That's
you
something
can.
that we can accept.
Yeah, that's obviously self-defense or defense of your family.
Okay.
Right, and we spray ants because they're bugging us, but they're not. They're not even killing us. When ants come into your house and take a little food, that's not really going to hurt you.
Yeah.
So, we decide, 10,000 ants, not worth getting some of my food stolen.
Yeah.
So, we make decisions based on weighing the pros and cons. For instance, having a child is a really, really big life-changing thing. If somebody doesn't feel like they need to deal with it, it's not enough to just say, the hell with the fetus, kill it. And it's not enough to say, the hell with what the woman wants. She had sex, so she's going to have the kid. You sort of have to look at the situation and say, what does it make sense? Which value is more important to me here? Just like you would have to think, well, 10,000 ants' lives, they're all living beings. They may even be conscious to some point, but they're stealing my food. I don't care.
Well, on the other hand, you have, we presume, consensual sex. Let's not go into non-consensual.
Okay.
It's like having a swimming pool open, right? You can, you need to put up fences and stuff like this to disinvite neighborhood children from coming in and falling into your pool.
Okay.
If you don't, okay, then they come and they fall in the pool. You're responsible for that child's death, right?
Okay.
It's the same thing with consensual sex, especially in this day and age where contraception is very easy to come by.
Depending on the situation, though, if you do put up a fence around your pool and a couple kids come along with chairs, climb the fence, jump in the pool, and drown, if you can show that you put up, you were reasonable in your protection, I guess, is kind of bordering the topic here. If you made a reasonable effort to make it safe, then you are not at fault. It was an accident. Somebody got killed. It wasn't your fault. Just like the same thing. If you can show that you reasonably took measures that you do not get pregnant, do not have kids, then again, you can make the argument that they shouldn't be bound, for no reason to make sure that they have that kid.
Well, the child itself has a right.
Well,
once you-
see,
once you get
that's
about,
where we get in a gray area
yeah.
because
no,
it's
no,
hard
no.
to do.
Well,
No,
once-
it is.
once you get-
Excuse me.
What?
It's hard. It's not well stated who has rights and who does not. For instance, does a sperm have rights? Just a sperm that isn't fertilized in an egg.
Does a sperm have rights? Obviously not. It's one cell.
Well,
Okay.
but a sperm is still a potential life, so why not?
You have a sperm over here and an egg over here.
Right.
Right.
All you
When
have
you
to
put
do is
those-
stick them together.
Yeah, it's just proximity.
Okay, well,
just
they're
proximity.
not together yet.
So you're saying this doesn't have rights, this does. No rights, rights.
Okay, spread your arms again.
Okay?
Okay,
This one up, this one down. Up
Not-
your nose.
human. Okay, now put them together.
Okay?
Human.
Why?
Why? It's one
Because it
cell.
starts growing that way.
It's still one cell. It has no consciousness.
It started
no feeling.
growing before. I mean, sperm get bigger.
Yeah.
So here we're getting into the argument of the first, second, or third trimester.
Well, I
Yeah.
think we missed a few steps,
some-
but that's where we get eventually.
At some point, yeah, okay, well, we need to get there. I mean, really. Because at some point, you have a human being. It's a small human being, and the nervous system is as yet is not very well developed, but it feels pain and fear.
Yeah, that's at a certain stage in development. Relatively late
Okay.
stage, but a stage in
Well,
development.
then
yeah.
when you reach that stage, do you think it's right to kill this being? Is it human?
It depends. Just like it depends whether, whether it's right to kill anyone.
Yeah. I'm not a biologist. I don't know the actual technical details of that. But look at it.
It's
Look at
between
it.
the
Look at
second
it this
and
way.
fourth month.
Look at it this way. When you have one cell, there's no consciousness there. It cannot survive on its own. It has no consciousness, can't feel, nothing like that. Skip ahead a few months, you've got a baby that, while it may not be able to survive on its own all that well, it's got feelings, some form of consciousness,
Right.
some feelings, stuff like that.
Even so, I mean, it still has no experiences, no memory.
Exactly.
There are arguments to be made, and I'm not going to make them,
Okay.
about whether just having emotions is enough.
Yeah.
But
But
I
even
mean,
if we accept that is enough and that constitutes a person that should not be killed, what about 2 days before that? What about 6 days? What about a month, 2 months, 3 months? You can't draw a line and say at day 36 and a half it becomes human. 5 minutes before it wasn't. 5 minutes after it is. Granted, there's a gray area. I don't think.
Right.
And so I can understand the position
but
that
I mean, it's
anywhere at conception and past, it's a potential human, therefore let it live. I can understand the argument. I don't necessarily agree with it personally,
yeah.
but I can
okay.
understand the concept.
Well,
So,
the short answer
that's
to
the
your
area of
question
argument.
is yes, there are atheists who are pro-life. I believe you're one of them.
Yeah.
Yes, there are arguments, and yes, it's complicated and it needs to be hashed out. At the same time, I think you'll find that the majority of pro-life arguments tend to be religious in nature, and that most
Well, I would
atheists
like
you
to
run
know how
into.
to make pro-life arguments without referring to an invisible, non-existent being.
That's not our job.
Yeah. There are articles. I've seen one on infidels.org. I think if you use the local Google search, you should be able to find, search for pro-life on infidels.org and see what you come up with. That would be my advice to you.
Yeah. I can't.
Do you think you could put it up on the screen for the people to see?
No, because
a
I don't
Google
have
search.
it. But I mean, just do some poking around. Maybe let us know what you find.
Yeah, infidels.org, Google searches, stuff like that. They should have some kind of information there, possibly. If you're asking for us to give you arguments, sorry, I don't. Apart from what we already told you, don't have any more. Are there more out there? Probably. I don't know them.
I see they're putting infidels.org on the screen.
This one.
Yeah, infidels.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other questions for us?
Not right now. I guess I'll have to phrase what I'm trying to do a little differently.
All right.
Okay.
See you, Mike.
Thanks for calling. All right. But again, this is just to point out what I was saying at the beginning of the call. Atheism is simply lack of belief in a God. That's it. There is no inherent, dogma or anything that says atheists must believe, this, that, or the other, or the obvious outcome to atheism is that you support or are pro-life, abortion, whatever. it doesn't necessarily follow. So, quick other reminder I forgot to mention earlier. After the show, for the last couple of, well, about a month or two now, we have been going down to a restaurant after the show, and some of the cast and crew and such will get together and eat burgers and such. Tonight we're going down to Chili's. It's on the southeast corner of I-35 and 183. The show ends at 6. We'll be down there around 6:30, 6:45. And this is, again, only for atheist-friendly people. I don't want to go down there and, debate a whole bunch of theists while eating my burger or anything like that. I don't need the indigestion. But again, if you want to come down and meet some of us, you are more than welcome to do so. Like I say, that's Chili's, I-35 and 183 at 6:30, 6:45, thereabouts. Okay, let me take a quick gander here. We have a couple quick news stories we can go over and get back to callers. Again, phone number, we can go on the screen really quickly, and we will get some more people coming in. Quick story here. This was actually in London, the London Underground. They have the tube stations down there. And a Christmas campaign for an Immaculate Contraception morning after birth control pill, I guess it now relates to our story, has been scrapped by a drug company in Britain after causing offense on religious grounds. The poster, which appeared in London Underground trains, asked Immaculate Contraception, if only. It might be Christmas time, it reads, but condoms still split and pills still get forgotten. So if your contraception lets you down, ask your pharmacist for Levenel one-step. Basically, it was a German company that came up with the ad, and they took them down after they got several letters, which I can imagine, saying that it's somewhat inappropriate, especially around the Christmas season. Very ballsy is all I can say. Very brave of them to put up something for Immaculate Contraception.
Well, not in Europe. It's not as brave as it would be here.
Exactly. Europe, a little bit easier on those type of things. Still kind of gutsy. But again, very interesting story that they've got there. So again, phone lines are open. We are taking calls. Again, two different things. One, where does morality come from? This is a whole Euthyphro. If God can say that killing is wrong, is it God's decision? Is he just making it up, saying killing wrong, helping people good? Or is he getting it from some higher authority and just passing on the word? We'd kind of like to know. Also, they have the whole Anthony Flew guy, who apparently wasn't a big prominent atheist and now is a deist. He basically said, I don't know how life on Earth could possibly have gotten started. It's so complicated. Therefore, it must be a God. What is the logical fallacy that he is doing? We will reveal it at the end of the show if nobody guesses it beforehand. People should be able to know that. So anyway, let's go on to one or two more calls. We have got, I assume, a different Mike. Line 2. You there, Mike?
Hi, guys. Yeah.
Okay. What you got for us?
The guy who called in about abortion, and I'm an atheist, and I'm definitely pro-choice.
Okay.
And a few years ago, I did looking at the internet and stuff, and found that a fertilized egg doesn't start having a heartbeat until about maybe 6 weeks after it's fertilized. It doesn't start having brain waves until sometime after that. And it's really not a viable organism which could live on its own until sometime after that.
Okay.
So I'm definitely pro-abortion up to a certain point, and anti-abortion at a certain point or after that point. Like you say, it's sort of gray as to when it is. But again, if a woman wants an abortion, I think that's her choice, and she should have it.
Okay.
Even if it's the day before birth?
No, then I'd be against it. Definitely, I'd be against it at that point. But again, it's gray, and when do you draw that line? It's $100,000 question.
Yeah.
But
right.
At some point, maybe 2 or 3 months before the birth date is due, I would say probably no abortion should be allowed at that point.
Okay.
Another point is, when I was doing this research, it said that about, I think 80% of all fertilized eggs are naturally aborted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, an egg gets fertilized, and it doesn't stick to the fallopian tube, and it gets washed out.
Yeah.
If these people who think that once an egg is fertilized is life, then what they should be doing is monitoring every couple that's copulating, determine whether an egg is fertilized, and do everything possible to save that fertilized egg, which...
Well, they would say that that's, playing theist advocate here, they would say that that's God's prerogative. If he chooses to kill them, that's his business and not ours.
Yeah.
Of course, the same thing should apply to keeping someone on life support.
Exactly. If they're going to die anyway, let them die. And lastly, the last point I want to make is that, if I were to believe in the Bible, I would be pro-choice again, because the Bible very clearly in Exodus 21, it says that if you strike a woman who's pregnant and the woman dies, you will be killed. If the woman survives and the child dies, well, you have to pay a fine.
Right.
So basically, there's a clear delineation between an unborn baby and a live human being in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so the Bible, according to the Bible, an unborn baby is not a live human being, so they should be pro-abortion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I've heard disputes about the way that's translated, but the bottom line is some people actually, I know at least some Jewish people use that as a pro-choice argument, which means that it has some religious basis. And, who's to say which religious group has interpreted it correctly? I think the only way to do it is to figure out reasonably what the right thing to do is, rather than try to guess which way God meant when he wrote that part.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
Again, as we all know, in the Bible, you can take whatever you want and interpret it however you want and get whatever your feelings are to support your feelings.
Yeah.
Now, I guess as far as your question, as far as where does morality come from, it's definitely not the Bible. It comes from within. Again, the Bible, I talk to people, Christians, about, they say, well, we get morality from the Bible. And I say, well, fine. The Bible says owning slaves is okay, therefore it's moral. Do you think owning slaves is moral? And they say, well, no, of course not. Well, then, but the Bible says it is. So if the Bible says it's moral. And they say, well, you have to remember when the Bible was written back in those days, slavery was, run of the realm, so it was okay.
Yeah.
So I say, well, that means that morality it changes with time. And they say, well, no, it's from the Bible and it's constant. In which case, well, then that means slavery is still moral.
Right. Couldn't God at least have been a little clearer, like saying flat out, owning slaves is bad, but if you have to, here's what you should do with them.
Well, yeah, but if owning slaves is bad, then you shouldn't own slaves. Just like killing is bad. So it's not, well, killing is bad, but if you have to, here's how you should do it.
Yeah, but, well, imagine going to some Vikings and telling them, hey guys, killing is bad. They wouldn't listen to you.
Oh, yeah.
This is the theist argument here, basically.
Yeah. But again, it's one of those things where the Bible does not give you morality. Morality comes from within, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's basically, again, I look back to ethics of reciprocity, which,
right.
basically the golden rule, which Confucius, said many years before the Bible. But that's all I had to say. Just, again, happy Mithra Day. That's coming up in about 13 days.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it is.
And happy Isaac Newton's birthday.
Yes, that too.
That's right.
That too.
So,
On December
good talking to you guys.
25th.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks for calling. Also, as a quick reminder about that, next week we are going to be having Don Baker and another member of the group, Tim Suto, come on the show. They'll be talking about some holiday traditions and origins and such. So we'll be having a little holiday fest next week. We will not actually be on the week after that, the 26th. Some of our members can't show up that day to actually make the show, so we'll be running a tape. But next week is definitely the one to watch. So next Sunday, 4:30 to 6, right here. Come back.
One more thing I would say about the Bible as far as it being locked into the culture of owning slaves and stuff. If the Bible was really supposed to be a timeless document, then it shouldn't have said that. But if it was going to be tailored to the society, maybe there should have been some new additions once in a while.
Yeah.
The Mormons, of course, think there were new additions, but other Christians don't go for that.
Well, I mean, if God wanted some kind of timeless book, wouldn't he have written it at least in different languages? They're saying that, he just kind of spoke through the writers of the Bible. They don't have to understand what they're writing. Make a whole bunch of these little marks on the paper. Don't worry, in 2,000 years, people will get it. Don't worry about it.
That would also be really persuasive evidence if they could write in modern English.
Exactly. If they found text buried in the Dead Sea Scrolls that explained in plain today's English exactly, what was going on in the Bible, that'd be like,
That
wow,
would
that's
be
kind of
cool.
cool.
I'd be suspicious of where they really came from.
Exactly,
But if
it could
that
be
turned out
shown,
to be genuine,
if it could be genuinely shown that it was written 2,000 years ago, that'd be that's a pretty good head scratcher. So, all right. Anyway, on to more phone calls. Phone number is on your screen. Go ahead and use it if you got some questions. Philip, you there?
Yes, hello?
Yep.
Hey, thanks for having me on the air, guys.
What's
Hi.
up?
I guess I just want to kind of just talk about, I guess you could say, like, all the religions, like, I guess, Christianity, and also Muslim. It's like, like, for example, like, you always hear, like, whenever they die, they have 72 virgins and this and that.
Yeah.
And also when Christians, they always speak about, if you're good and you follow the book of the law, which is the Bible, I guess, that, you'll go to heaven and you'll have an immortal life. And I guess I'm just kind of wanting to say, like, people need to stop being so selfish, because, I mean, that's basically, people are believing in this because it's benefiting them in the end.
Yeah.
Like immortality, 72 virgins. It's just perfect human nature of being selfish.
Oh, yeah.
And instead, I think, like, of course, when you die, like, you're decomposed, and instead of looking at that, like, more or less, like, maybe your immortal life, like, you can help a tree grow or something like that. Whenever you die, you become like worm food, fertilizer, stuff like that.
Yeah.
yeah. I just saw the new version of Dawn of the Dead on DVD, and it convinced me that while death seems pretty bad, could be worse.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I'm not atheist, guys. I mean, I definitely believe, like, that there's a higher being, that may have, I guess, it's just, yeah, we can sit here and talk about it all night, but I mean, I guess there's got to be something up there, and I guess it's mainly just like, the human nature is just, you question is how it all became, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an ongoing question. It's been going on for our whole life, and it will continue to go on.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wanted to throw that out, and I guess people just need to stop being so selfish and thinking about themselves.
Goes back to the whole morality question. Are you doing what the Bible says because it is inherently good,
That's another thing.
or because God says to do it?
And I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, so we went to church on Saturdays. Well, I mean, we followed the Bible. We didn't. I grew up not eating pork and no shellfish and stuff like that. So just growing up, and I mean, the Bible, I guess you could say, it's like a good blueprint on how to live a healthy lifestyle.
But it's not.
If you pick and choose the right parts, then it can be good.
Well, of course, you're supposed to take it very symbolically. I mean, it's a very symbolic book,
Well, I mean, how do you know?
Don't take it literally.
The symbolism of dash the little ones' heads against the rocks.
Yeah, and so on, it gets really wild.
So.
But yeah, and look at what religion has got us so far. I mean, we got them, them in the Middle East. We got people screaming jihad against us and this and that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got a president that claims he spoke to God. Which, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a very, very, very difficult time.
Yeah, it does cut both ways, but again, that's where we kind of think the rational argument should take over and provide a better guide, because yes, religion on one hand can do the jihad and let's go to war with the rest of the world because Jesus says I'm right, and then you've also got, well, let's build a homeless shelter, food banks. So you've got those two extremes.
Yeah.
And trying to be rational doesn't automatically mean that you'll get to the right answer, I want to say.
Of course.
But at least you're trying.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you guys have your own right. You guys can be atheists. I mean, and I'm not chastising you for it at all. I mean, that's one great thing about this country is, you guys have your beliefs, I have mine, and thank you for having me on the air. And we, managed to discuss this so, ethically and peacefully.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks a lot for calling.
You guys take care. Okay.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, if I want to rephrase that whole Euthyphro morality question.
Euthyphro.
I'm sorry. It'll take me a while
We've
to get
gotten
that
sort
in.
of a consensus from a bunch of different scholars.
Okay. I'm going to have to retrain myself on that Euthyphro. But anyway, why are religious people good? If they're doing it because God says so. You're good because God said this is good, this is bad. Then are you doing it so that you can get the reward because you're following what he says and it's essentially just selfish? Or are you doing it because murder really is bad?
Right.
In most situations, killing people really is bad.
Then you've got some really out there arguments like, even if God is the author of morality, how do you know that what you've what you're talking to is God. What Christianity has this whole concept of Satan, the prince of lies.
Yeah.
What if Satan wrote the Bible?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just fun head games. We don't believe any of it.
That's a whole, is it God that's talking to you or the brain tumor? So, can't tell sometimes.
Yeah, because we're pretty sure
your
that
psychosis.
that women who kill their kids weren't being talked to by God,
Yeah, typically
even though
we
they
don't-
say they do.
Yeah, typically all the women out there who said, I'm opening up this homeless shelter because, Jesus told me to. Okay, that's a little bit weird, but good
That's
for
nice.
you. That's nice. We support you in that. But if she comes along and says, God told me to kill my kids, and so they're in the bathtub now, we typically don't say, that's nice. So, anyway, fun times on this show.
Yes.
Again, phone number is on your
Always
screen.
tasteful.
Exactly. Phone number is on your screen. You got any questions or comments, please give us a call. Vince, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, what you got for us?
All right.
Thanks for taking my call. I just was wondering what kind of response you would have to the recent news that Anthony Flew, the famous British
We already
atheist,
talked about that.
recently defected to the other side,
Yeah.
lost one of your own, and what he's essentially propounding now is something very similar to the intelligent design theory,
Yeah.
which, as you well know, is the idea that because the universe is so complex and because intelligence arises, that there must be some sort of super intelligence, some sort of starting point, creator.
That's kind of
and I was just wondering what the atheist's response was to the intelligence design theory. Seems to be kind of catching on. And
first off, to go back to the original thing, Anthony Flew. The article positions him as being some big prominent atheist. I have not actually...
I never heard of him.
Yeah, I've never heard of him before. Regardless of the fact, though, I mean, he's apparently had quite a few books and videos and all that kind of stuff out there. Apparently been, pretty good thinker for his life. The fact that he's now 81 and has found something different just means that he's had a lapse in judgment, apparently, according to my book.
Well, let me put it this way. People change their minds all the time. A lot of Christians change their mind and decide that they want to be atheists, and a lot of people go the other way. I mean, I like Dan Barker's book, Losing Faith in Faith, where he goes from fundamentalist to atheist. People go both ways. You just pretty much have to look at what their reasoning is and whether it's sound. You can't rely on somebody's authority to decide whether what they said is always right.
Exactly. If he came up with a really good argument saying, I am now a deist because of blah, and that was a good argument, then I'd say, okay, I hadn't thought of that before. I guess I agree with you.
What do you think of this intelligent design theory? Because the reason why I bring him up as an example is because it seems to be catching fire with some pretty intelligent people.
Yeah, but not with biologists.
Yeah, it's bunk.
I mean, it's catching fire with a lot of intelligent people, but the intelligent people almost universally, except for a couple of exceptions like Behe and Dembski, are like lawyers. And people who have political motivations. If you take a look at the breakdown of scientists, you'll find that almost none of them who have experience in relevant fields actually buy intelligent design theory in any way.
Yeah. The people who are promoting intelligent design, the reason that we're hearing about it, and you say that, it's kind of catching winds, I guess.
What did Anthony Flew do? Does it say?
I don't know.
I mean, was he just a guy who made videos? And if so, what relevance is his opinion?
A British philosopher and
philosophy professor.
Yeah.
So a philosophy professor says there's no way for biologists to explain the origin of life when biologists apparently disagree.
Yeah.
Well, but if you're going back to first cause, you're not just discussing issues like evolution. I mean, you can actually have a discussion about the origins of the universe without having to discuss necessarily the origin of life, on this planet. I mean, you can have a first cause. I mean, I think, for we who are not scientists, I think it's pretty compelling.
And I'm going to put
the idea that if you look at something like a house that's there and it's complex and you stumble on it and you
How
not
complex
like it because
is
it's
God?
logic and But and you come upon that, you think to yourself that perhaps that there was a designer.
Hey,
perhaps
okay.
it was built
Would
and not just
you
random.
say that God is simple or complex?
Well, I mean, I think I'm simple, so my understanding is probably.
Oh, so you're simple, then you don't need a designer. No problem.
Well, so I guess
You're not complex.
the atheists are extremely complex, and so they don't need one. And I don't understand. I mean,
Well, you say that things that are complex must be designed, right?
I don't say they must be, but I say that I
Okay,
think
then.
Well, then there's no argument.
Well, I think it's more likely that if something is complex and it represents something.
Likely has nothing to do with it. There's no evidence that God exists.
We're all talking. I mean, atheists, you can't prove a negative, right? You can't prove that there's not a God. No one can prove a negative.
Yeah, but that's not our
I mean,
job.
all we're talking about is whether
actually.
it's more and less likely, right?
Yeah, but that's not our job. The theists are out there
it's
saying...
not my job to prove it absolutely either, is it?
Well,
then
It's just we're talking about what is more and less likely.
It's the theist. It's a theist proposition that there is some, big being out there who created everything.
Do you
They're the
believe?
ones who have to prove that.
Do you believe that there has to be a God, or that there might not be?
Now you are sounding like a lawyer. I mean, as opposed. Well, I mean, you just
Logical.
talking about how lawyers, don't tend to think like scientists.
Is it not logical?
I didn't say that to denigrate lawyers. I know some very nice lawyers, but I wouldn't rely on a lawyer to tell me how science works.
Exactly.
Right.
Or biologists.
And I don't think that you necessarily have to be a scientist or use scientific arguments to discuss something like first cause, and that's why I say you can't prove a negative, because it does get into philosophy and logic and those sorts of things. Because if you're talking about whether or not there's a first cause, you are talking about probability. You're talking about theory.
Not necessarily. Let's hold on here for a second.
Okay.
The challenge to all the viewers who've been keeping up is off.
Wait a minute. Maybe we should put Vince on hold and get Steve, because he might have something to say about it.
No, let's just go in here.
All right. Well, sorry, Steve.
If you
that's
had the
what
answer
you
to our
want.
challenge, we're sorry. But anyway, our
screeners will tell us.
Anthony Flew basically said that life is so complicated, I don't understand how it could have possibly come about by chance or natural processes and such. Therefore, it must have been God or some kind of higher intelligence. Just because you don't know how it was done doesn't mean that it wasn't. I don't know exactly every detail of how electricity works, but I can still go over to the light switch and turn it on and it works. I don't have to say, since I can't possibly understand how it all works, it must be God. Somebody out there does. Now, we might extend that and say, we have not figured out how the universe started or what caused the first reproducing life system. We don't know that for sure. We have some theories out there, but no solid evidence saying this is the way that it happened. Just because you don't know doesn't mean that you can say God did it, because that answers absolutely nothing. It just gives you a whole nother level to push us back and say, well, where did God come from? How come he gets to be the way out that just happens to be, when your life, well, that can't be that. That can't have just happened by chance. God, that can do it. Life can't.
Right, and if the matter in the universe is so complicated that it must need a designer, then how come we can make up an omniscient, omnipotent being who listens to 6 billion people's prayers and issues and does like micromanaging stuff, like help people find their lost car keys when they pray, but he doesn't need a designer? Isn't that pretty complicated?
Well, I think that's a problem for any theory about the origins.
Yeah, but it's a bigger problem. It's a bigger problem for theists, because it's an even bigger problem for theists than non-theists, because now you're making up something that we've never seen or touched or had any kind of evidence for of any sort. Creating this thing in your mind that is more complicated than all the other stuff in the universe put together, and then saying, well, that just is.
I don't think it's any more difficult than finding a baby, for instance, and assuming that there's a parent behind it, and let's say you knew nothing about.
Okay, so then where did God come from?
I don't know.
Yeah, the baby has a parent, we know.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I mean, it's possible. I mean, you were talking about the Mormons earlier. They're polytheists. They believe that there was a God, and then there was a God before that, and
basically there is, zilch evidence.
It's just as difficult to conceive of an infinite source going back and having some scientific explanation. It's just as difficult to grasp that as a human being.
Okay, so let's add on top of that a layer of complexity. Yeah, so let's add on top of
it is to grasp the idea of a first creator.
Okay,
I don't understand
why. So you're saying that it's really impossible to say that random chance and things like that could have produced the universe. Therefore, there must have been a God. Well,
those had to those had to have an origin as well too, right? So I mean, even if you're talking about let's say the first atom or subatomic particle or whatever,
we don't know. We're looking into it.
Well,
but there is zero evidence. There is zero evidence for any kind of a God. Period. Full stop. No evidence whatsoever. And we have evidence of science. We know how science works. We don't know how the universe started, but we've got some pretty good ideas. Why do we have to posit something which we have absolutely no evidence for and say that did it, when we can just say we've got some theories that are kind of being worked out right now that look like they might be on the right trail? Let's follow those, rather than say, dump all that stuff. It must have been this thing, which we've never seen before, never heard of, have no evidence for, no consciousness of, but hey, it must have did it.
I'll say one last thing, and I'll let you guys go ahead and move on to friendlier call. But you do say that No, I really do enjoy your show, and I think you guys are quite intelligent and quite knowledgeable. But I would say that I've heard you say a number of times, there's no evidence, no evidence, no evidence. I mean, you might not like the evidence, but it does constitute evidence. I mean, the reason why I bring up the intelligent design theory is that a lot of people believe that a lot of what we're discovering and the origins of mapping the human genome, the intelligence of life, the anti-entropic nature of life.
Biologists typically
the Bible
don't agree
even
with
is evidence. You might not think it's good evidence, but it is evidence.
The evidence is fine. We dispute what you think the evidence points to. Okay, I mean, what you say it's evidence for.
We're going back to what's probability, right? We talk about whether it's more probable.
But you never address the probability that there could be a God. I mean, the probability that some infinitely complex and super intelligent being could just happen to exist without any cause.
I just don't. Again, I don't see that as any more difficult than seeing, anything else that's a first cause.
You think God is equally complicated as an atom, no more?
What's that?
You think a single atom is just as complicated as God?
No, I'm not saying that it's...
Okay, then God is harder to explain than one atom.
The first atom's origin is just as complicated to grasp as a concept as it is to grasp who created. I mean, in other words, you're asking the question as an atheist that you get so upset at theists for asking.
I'm not upset.
No.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm not upset, but you know what I mean. But you criticize theists for asking the question of, well, where did we come from? We must have an origin. And yet you ask the same question for an atom, and you continue to go back,
Yeah, but again, we're looking at science to try and provide those answers. We're looking at science trying to provide those answers.
But aren't theists doing the same thing? I mean, they're looking at answers.
No, they're not looking for answers. They think they've found it. Discussion closed.
Yeah, well,
God did it. End of story.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
They're essentially saying God did it. End of story.
Right, but
that doesn't answer anything.
But there's lots of discussions. I mean, you wouldn't say that every single theist. I mean, there's lots of intelligent theists out there. You wouldn't say that every single one is not continuing to search for the answer of what is the nature of God. What is the nature of man? I mean, these are the most important questions to religion today, right? What is the nature of God? That's the question that goes back as far as Thomas Aquinas, right? So, I mean, that's continuing to ask the question. I mean, that's continuing to explore. They don't happen to use, and science goes back and forth as well. I mean, it's not as rock solid as it's made out to be. I mean, theories are created and destroyed. And,
agreed.
But that is what science is all about, essentially.
But religion might be about that as well too.
Religion is about getting your morals out of a book that hasn't changed in 2,000 years, and that's basically what we disagree with. That a book that says it's okay to own slaves because that's what they did at that time is still considered to be an absolute authority on how you should act today. And we've got, 6 minutes left?
We've got a couple minutes left.
Hey, I've enjoyed talking to you.
Okay, thanks a lot for calling. Again, I posit that we have no evidence of God. We have better evidence to say this is how things could have started. We have good ideas, and experimental evidence is kind of backing those up to a certain extent. We're not there yet, but we're on the right track, we think. That is a much better thing to rely on than just saying, must have been God. So, anyway, we have got about 5 minutes left. We're going to go on to one or two more callers, quick as we can. Let's go on to Tim. You there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, what you got for us?
Steve.
Well, this will be your friendlier call, like he had said. I watch you guys all the time. I think you're great. I think I came to all my my beliefs long before I started watching your show. And then when I started watching your show, I said, hey, here's somebody who believes exactly the same thing I do. So you guys are right on the money as far as I'm concerned.
Thanks.
Except there's one thing I have, it's more of a semantic issue, really. I've called before and talked to you guys about it. It's about the difference between atheism and agnosticism. Okay. And I know the standard argument for that. You know how atheist is. Let's see. You have how does it go? You have agnostic theist and atheist theist, and meaning agnostic theist meaning I don't know that there's a God. Yeah. And Gnostic theist, meaning I do know there's a God. And the point I wanted to get down to is that with atheists, as well as with myself, I can't see how atheists can't, there's not an interjection of a little bit of faith in there. And not faith in God, but faith that since you don't have all of the answers, and you were just saying that we're not there yet.
Yeah.
We haven't completely disproven God. But isn't there an element of just somewhat of a little bit of faith that you have to take that leap of faith where you're saying
Okay. Okay, run.
Okay, real quick. Do you believe that I own a dog?
I do not know.
Okay. Do you have faith that I don't own a dog?
I have no idea. I don't know if you own a dog or not.
Okay.
A dragon.
So you don't... No.
Okay.
A dog.
Okay, dog.
So you don't have faith that I own a dog?
I do not have faith.
That I don't.
I do not have faith that you own a dog.
Or that I don't have a dog.
Or that you don't have a dog.
But you don't have a specific belief saying I don't own it, or saying that I own a dog or don't own one.
Correct, and which makes me an agnostic toward the fact that you own a dog.
But it also means you do not have a belief of my owning a dog, and that involves no faith, and that's our position, basically.
Well, what I'm saying is, aren't there things that, I know you guys are light years beyond the theists. I know theists, if they say God is the answer and that's it, there's no question, forget everybody else. And I know that you guys you're seeking the truth, basically, and you're using science, and I completely, and I do the same thing. I completely understand that. But and I also know that you guys don't like the word faith, because that implies something that that's theistic in nature. But
go ahead and wrap up your ideas quick. Got about a minute left.
Okay. But what I'm just getting at is that I just see just a small element of just a small leap of faith for those last remaining things that science can't yet prove.
Okay.
That it's like connecting the dots.
Okay.
You have 9,000 dots, and you have small spaces in between, and you're almost there. But
we're going to go ahead and let you go. Got to sign off. Try and go back in next week. Anyway, if you didn't get on the air, TV at atheist-community.org. That will get to everybody on the show, and we can answer you via email. Also, we are going down to Chili's after the show, a couple of us, to have dinner. And so if you're atheist friendly, Chili's on right at the southeast corner of I-35 and 183. We'll be there in about half an hour, 45 minutes. Thank you, Russell, for coming on the show.
Thank you, and don't forget to check out euthyphroproject.com.
Exactly, and we'll see everybody next week.
Bye.